Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining this webinar today. We're going to talk about pastured poultry and eggs. So I just want to firstly acknowledge the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation from where I'm presenting from today, and also all the First Nations from where you're all dialing from, as the traditional custodians of the lands across WA, Australia and the world. And I'd also like to pay my respects to the elders past and present. My name is Tibby and I'm the Sustainable Agriculture Facilitator at Perth NRM. Also represent RegenWA, and this webinar is supported by Lotterywest and also the Department of Water and Environmental Regulations through their SoilWise program. So I'm just going to introduce our presenters and we'll start with Blythe. So Blythe Calnan is from Runnymede Farm. She runs it with her partner, Greg Hooper, and they've been running it since 2014. One of their goals is to make the farm more climate resilient and to contribute towards building a healthier planet. Through the use of regen ag principles, such as improving soil biology and increasing pasture diversity, Blythe has seen an extension of their growing season and an increase in water holding capacity and carbon in the soil. And their main advice to anyone starting out is to find support and to build relationships with like-minded producers and community. So I'm going to get everyone, if you've got questions for Blythe and also for Sam, chuck them in the Q&A. You can see a little link up the top, chuck it in there and I will call them out at the end of both presentations. And then if you've got any further ones that come up, you can just, keep chucking them in there and we'll crack on. So Blythe, we'll start with you. Welcome.
Cool, thanks Tib. Thanks everyone for being here today. I'll just set up my screen share. All right, how does that look, Tib? Give me a thumbs up.
Yep, that works.
Awesome. All right, thanks everyone for making the time to come here today. It's a real pleasure to speak to you all about our pastured egg operation. It is an area I'm really passionate about, and we'll talk through sort of what we've been through, what we've learned and what our best tips are. I'm going to do that in the format of a bit of an overview and then a SWOT analysis of a pastured egg business. I'm just going to switch a timer on because everything always seems to go slowly and all of a sudden 20 minutes is up. We will have time for questions at the end, so just write anything down if there's anything you want me to elaborate on, and Tib will manage a question session at the end.
Cool. Yes, there will be a recording of the whole thing as well.
Yep, and feel free, so you will get a recording of this, feel free to screenshot anything. Yep, take it all on board. An overview of our operation. We run 5 vans, so each van setup is about 500 hens each. So we currently run about 2,500 birds in our operation. That mostly comprises of 2,000 laying birds and then a flock of pullets coming up through. About half of our eggs go into wholesale and mostly through Dirty Clean Food and a few other wholesalers, and about half go through farmers markets up in Perth. We have one full-time employee, so she works Monday to Fridays and does the occasional market for us. And she does about 40 hours a week in the egg collecting, egg processing, and general bits and pieces. And then Greg and I still work part-time in the business. I do most of the sort of hen health management. We do moves, which happen after dark. And I oversee feed and water. And Greg is our overworked maintenance manager. And I think it's good to point out that the hens are a real profit driver in our operation. We run about 140 beef breeders as well as the hens. When beef pricing was really good, they sort of pulled their weight equally. Over the last sort of 6 to 12 months, with things dropping away, the hens are actually a bigger profit driver in our business than the cattle are. So for that, it's really important, and we wouldn't have been able to grow to the point we have without the stability and cash flow which the egg operation gives us. Everyone wants to kind of run big livestock when they start out. They think cattle and sheep are pretty sexy. That's how you become a farmer. in reality, the smaller the animal, generally the quicker the turnover and the higher the profitability. So life cycle of birds in our system, we buy in pullets at point of lay. So they come in at about 16 weeks or 4 months old, and they head out of our system when they're sort of 16 to 18 months old. We manage to rehome everything into a backyard market. That's a big part of what we do. We sell those hens off for somewhere between sort of $5 to $10, and they all head off for backyards. So we've partnered in the last 12 months with someone who actually takes 200 birds at a time, and then resells those birds, which has worked out better for us as we get bigger. But I think it is really important for us, you know, in that regenerative space, to be taking responsibility for birds all the way through. We'd love to raise our own chicks, but the time and effort of doing that at a small scale is just something we're not ready to take on at this stage. So budgeting wise, we budget on about 120 grams of feed per bird per day. At the moment, our feed is just over $700 a tonne, and that's bought in 12-tonne lots into a silo. And we budget on about 85% lay rate. We'll get higher than that in peak conditions, but lower than that during that autumn midwinter period with short daylight hours. The main skills required, I think, to be successful in this pastured egg or any pastured poultry space is a good attitude. They really will test you. They'll test your relationships, and it's a constant learning curve. So if you're going into it with some hesitations, maybe just have a good look at that, because it is a steep learning curve where you will figure a lot of things out on the fly. Skills of observation, dealing with small stock, you really need to be onto your bird health, your bird behaviour. They'll tell you if something's wrong long before it actually presents in your flock. So make sure your people on the ground are really paying attention. And that patience, you know, you can put 700 birds kind of to bed at night by hand because you moved the van too far or you've mucked up in your pullet training. They really will test your patience. I've trained a lot of horses and a lot of dogs and a few boyfriends, and chickens trained me. So the strengths of the pastured egg business, so cash flow is really important for us. You know, you can get in some point of lay birds and within 6 weeks they can actually be paying their own way and generating cash flow for you. You know, when you look at that compared to a cattle or even a sheep enterprise, how long it takes you to get a calf on the ground and then grow that calf out to a saleable weight, the cash flow component of chickens is really positive and a real strength. The low-cost startup, you know, you're still looking at somewhere between 30 to 100K to get all your startup equipment, but, you know, that's relatively low compared to a lot of other agricultural industries. I really like that you don't have to own the land which you're operating a pastured poultry enterprise on. If you are onto your management and onto your communication, then that, you know, that enterprise can sit on cropping, beef, dairy, sheep, horticulture. You know, you've got some real flexibility about where you put these enterprises. Another strength in the egg department is the recognition of consumers of welfare standards in eggs. People are very aware that free range is false, and they are really looking for something which meets a higher level, which pastured is becoming more and more recognised as. We get a lot of people coming on board because of our welfare systems and staying on board and becoming really loyal because of the quality of the product. The quality of an egg in a pastured setup, which is managed well, which has great quality feed, is way, way beyond your average egg. The weaknesses of the system, it is super labour intensive. You know, all of our eggs get handled about 6 times by the time they get to a consumer. That's all by hand. We have a little bit of technology in the egg shed with a vacuum lifter and things that helps us a bit, but there is a lot of manual handling both of the eggs and of the birds. So to maintain kind of our regenerative goals, our birds are moved between sort of 2 and 4 days. The whole setup is moved forward. So that means being out after dark once the birds are in bed. all times of the year, all weathers of the year, all family events. And that is another real part of it, that labour intensiveness. I encourage people to be aiming to get to a scale where you can get help, because otherwise 365 days of the year, you were on that chicken train. When we first started, Jeff and Michelle down at Southampton said, welcome to the chicken train. It's once you're on, it's pretty tough getting off. Land degradation. So the impact that birds have on the ground can be really negative. And I'm sure everyone here, if you've got some interest in chickens, you've seen chicken coops, and they're normally devoid of any vegetation. There's a lot of digging because of the sandbathing, and your birds will do that to your paddocks if you don't have that system mobile enough. So just because you're pastured does not actually mean you're regenerative or heading in a positive direction with your soil health. If your rotation isn't long enough, if your recovery isn't long enough, if you're not applying and releasing that pressure. The scale, so the scale hits you in a number of ways. In a lack of scale, makes it difficult to get help in the system. And also your hen changeover can get pretty difficult. So, you obviously need to have a set of pullets coming onto the lay before you retire your old birds to have continuity of supply. And that we found that really tricky when we were smaller, because, you couldn't have one van producing and then have a whole van sitting there just for bird changeover. It didn't make sense to have that much capital invested in infrastructure that was only being used 2 months of the year. So that was a really tricky time for us till when we got to the point where we almost continually have a pullet flock turning over. The seasonality of production, this is really tricky. Like many people, we had big dreams of using heritage birds when we first started. And that got knocked on the head pretty quickly once we realised the seasonality of production, even with a commercial hybrid hen like the Highlines, which we use. We haven't used much lighting up to this point, but we will be increasing some lighting over that autumn and winter, simply because, your consumers and your markets really don't like those, they don't cope with those big changes in production. So keeping your birds in their peak health-wise, in their peak age-wise, helps even that out. But definitely some lighting, which, we'll probably do, say, from 7 a.m. till 6 p.m. And even that much will really, really change and keep our birds ticking over a bit. And the year-round hen management. So for a lot of people, the choice between a meat enterprise and an egg enterprise. You can be a bit more seasonal with your meat enterprise by having birds when it suits you and not having them when it doesn't. Once you've got egg-laying birds, you need to keep on producing that year-round to keep your markets. Opportunities, I do see some really big opportunities in the pastured egg space. There's lots of talk about phased out of caged birds. That can't happen soon enough. For me, from a welfare perspective, I can't believe in a country that calls itself first world, we still keep animals in cages their entire productive life and kill them when we're done. Over the next 10 years, this is going to happen. Nearly 50% of eggs produced in Australia are still coming out of cages. So that is going to leave a big gap in production. I think maybe the phase out will take longer. But, there's a lot of aged infrastructure within the more intensive chicken production. It's in peri-urban areas. The reality is a lot of those are going to be not getting renewed, people moving out of the industry and leaving a lot of room for people to come in. There is more and more recognition of the importance of regenerative agriculture, of systems which are improving the health of, our birds, our animals, our food, our land, our communities. And I would really love to see a pastured egg producer for every town so that we have that really local food movement. At the moment, about 30% of our eggs in Western Australia are still coming from the eastern states. And so once again, it just everything points towards there being so much opportunity in this egg area in the near future. People are really interested in the localness of it. And from a marketing perspective, there's really beautiful visuals of a pastured sort of bird system. You know, you don't actually have to try very hard to have birds out on grass, good ground cover, free to come and go. It is an easy sell marketing wise. And there is that direct correlation between your feed quality and your egg quality. So I'd really encourage people, if you're going into it, not to scrimp on that feed, and really make sure you're putting the best in to get the best out, because that sells your product so well. Threats. There's always a few threats. Predation is probably one of the biggest once you're started. I'm a big fan of guardian dogs. We run Maremas and more now Anatolians. So we don't lock up our birds at all, and we don't have any fencing. So we moved away from netting because it was stopping us from moving as quickly as we wanted to. Anyone who's dealt with netting, it's really cumbersome. It's really painful. Doing it once or twice occasionally is all right, but you really want to make the right thing, the easy thing, to keep those birds moving. So we went to a boundary electric fence for our dogs, and put a lot of time and effort into training dogs and developing a team that was effective. And now our birds are open 24/7 with no fencing at all. And we have 5 guardian dogs, so we keep one sort of per van, but they all run together out there. And I reckon within 2 nights of those dogs being absent, we'd be at a non-commercial level. The big threat, which maybe should become before predation, because you need to get up and going first, is regulation, and the lack of regulation for low density poultry enterprises in Western Australia. Some really good regs have come out of Victoria. They revamped their system a little while ago and now have specific regulation for low density operations. And, you know, this is what, if you're starting out, lean on really heavily. And I've got some links at the end of this presentation for support in Western Australia to help you through that. DPIRD was working on some regulation, which they've recently put on the back burner due to a lack of pastured egg approvals coming through. But I've encouraged them to kind of put that back in their focus, because I think there will be a lot more. But the core issue of that regulation is local government not understanding the pastured egg system. So any poultry enterprise is a change of land use. When it comes to planning, it's not normal agriculture, and it's up to the shire to work their way through that. So some shires consider less than 1,000 birds not to be a commercial operation, so they'll wave you through, and then you will still need your food business registration. But for some shires, anything above 50 birds, they make you go through a change of land use, which makes you, puts you in front of the mining department, main roads, water department, which is the biggest blocker due to the potential of groundwater contamination. But they really put you through the ringer, and that was certainly our hardest part of getting started. The other major threat is burnout. A lot of producers come into a egg and chicken or any intensive enterprise and end up burning out within a few years because they don't have the systems in place to give themselves time out. That is really real, and I see it in the smaller scale agriculture a lot. So really taking care of yourself and having plans. You know, you can work really hard for a short amount of time or a medium amount of time, but you have to have a plan to get yourself off that treadmill and be able to recharge and enjoy life. Understanding flock health. A lot of people come in that aren't, chicken nuts to begin with. And I was certainly one of those. I'd only had a few backyard birds before we started. But just because, you know, your intent is good does not automatically mean that your bird health is going to be amazing. In a pastured environment, you've got a lot of exposure to, you know, every disease and bug flying past. Vaccination is really important, and having some veterinary support is really important. I see too many people not seeking it until it's way too late. So I would be, you know, that bird health underpins your whole business. So when I start out, I would be developing a relationship with a specialist bird vet. We have a very good one here in WA called Portec, just to make sure that you're supporting that flock health. Business skills. You can be an incredible farmer, you can be an incredible chicken person. If you don't have good business skills, the thing will fall over as well. So developing those. As we head into another 40-degree day down here, heat waves are quite pertinent. Assessing your infrastructure design for a heating environment. We're on the coastal plain, so we don't hit those high temps. We cool down at night. We've got access to water, and the sea breeze is our friend. Our vans are also made out of sandwich board, so an insulated panel, which means that the footprint of those vans stays cool even in extreme temperatures. The amount of vans getting around and infrastructure getting around that is made of sheet metal really concerns me. So looking at your infrastructure design, the resources you have available on your farm, how much shade you've got available on your farm is really important. I think last January we had 7 days over 40 down here near Harvey, which is pretty full on. And I think we had 3 days over 40 here last week and heading for another 3 this week. So those summer temps are really getting up there. Threats, bird flu, flood, fire. There is always a risk with so avian flu breakouts and things. We accept there is a risk that we could have to colour flock, take a pause and start up again later. That has happened previously in Victoria with people, and you do need to be realistic about that. Flood, not so much for us. I guess West Australians been very fortunate so far that we haven't had those significant flood events. Some people have been really badly affected by that over east. And fire is something we always need to have those contingency plans for. So from a welfare perspective, having a bit of a plan in case those things happen. And grain pricing is another threat. We've got a policy that we will flex our pricing with that grain pricing, but understanding your cost of production and what's contributing and having the communication to follow that through and put your prices up where needed is going to be really important with increasing uncertainty in the market. The impacts of eggs on, this is where I really look with my work at what impact it's having on the different areas of the farm. Impact on the people, eggs have been a pretty hard road for us. We've been ambitious, we've sort of upgraded properties a few times, we carry a fair bit of debt, and it's put us under a lot of pressure, but it has allowed us to expand, and that is largely down to the eggs. It's put a fair bit of strain on myself and Greg's relationship at times because chickens damage ground and our goals are, to be repairing and healing ground. So there's some conflict there, which isn't always bad because it drives you to improve. And I think that the best thing to come of eggs for the people is giving us as producers that connection with our consumers. I think that's something that's missing for a lot of farmers in general, is actually getting direct feedback. So, being at the markets and having people who are really appreciate and value and kind of are grateful for what you're doing does really help getting through the hard times. So having those really good relationships. Production, so it's allowed us to, our property when we took it over was ex-dairy, a bit of a Ferrari as far as inputs go. So the eggs actually allowed us to take the foot off the pedal on the cattle side of things and focus on getting that grass growing under a biological system without having to really push production to service debt through the cattle side of things. So it's a really, and now, 5 years in, I think we're a couple of days or 5 years here. We're at a production side of things with the cattle and the grass where we can start increasing that, but we did need to be able to take that bit of a lull, which the eggs allowed us to do. The land, the chooks have been really good for the land, except where they've stayed too long. Heard a quote the other day from Dallas Mount that, if you're not failing at things, then you're not pushing the envelope and trying hard enough. And we've certainly left birds too long in places. Our winter management is something we need to improve when we get really wet down here. But overall, the manure impact on the ground has been positive. We're seeing an improvement in soil structure, soil health, plant health in the areas the birds are, as long as that recovery period is long enough. And the business, you know, as I've already iterated, the eggs have allowed us to expand the business beyond what we would have been able to do with large ruminants. Our bank loves the chickens. They really are a great cash flow option for them, and they like, you know, seeing what's improving and like that we're meeting what the market wants. And it's pretty, you know, from a business perspective, it's fairly uncomplicated. I really like the eggs because they are a simple supply chain. There's no cold chain management. You've got a bit of flexibility with a 6-week best before. And so it does give our business a lot of resilience. What's next for us at Runnymede? So it's creating relationships with high volume retailers to increase opportunities for pastured eggs. For the last few years, every time we've increased production, it's been to service our current markets. So we're actually just for the first time now sort of reaching out into a broader market and trying to create more opportunities for pastured eggs. The way we see the industry going in the future and the way we see we can support that is not through increasing the amount of birds ourselves. For our property geographically and property specific limitations as far as our irrigation infrastructure and things, this is as many hens as we want, but we see some real opportunity in being able to support other people getting into the industry by aiding in the processing side of things, the marketing, the distribution. So it could be pastured eggs would be a lot more accessible for more farmers if all they had to do was run the birds and produce the eggs and get the benefits from those birds, and then put the pastured eggs into a bigger branding. So that's something we see real potential in and opportunity in, and how we can use our skills and experience to help. And for us, you know, there's a few things we still need to get better at. So the rotations in winter management, as I've said, you know, getting a really good mulch base under our hens so that we can pull them up a bit in really wet winters, and pullet training, something that fascinates me, and I need to take some more time in really getting those young hens laying in the right spot in a quick amount of time, so you can get them on the road. So both dirty eggs and ground layers are your biggest wastes of eggs. The key tips I see, nearly winding up tip, is defining your goals and visions. It's really hard to start up a business and head where you want to go if you haven't clearly defined where you want to go. In all sides of business, really knowing that. The planning, monitoring and managing is key. You can't just wander along. You need to know what your goal and vision is so that you know whether you're heading towards it or away from it. And then you need to have that plan on how to get there. Staying curious. You can do things beyond what you ever thought you could, and you can do things which no one ever's done before, but not if you're not staying curious. Finding your people, finding a supportive network is really important, and someone else's supportive network might not be your supportive network, but find people who kind of share your visions, share your goals, and really believe you can do it. When we first started doing this 2014, 8 years ago, there wasn't a big regenerative network, and people we spoke to said we couldn't do what we wanted to do. You know, running 2,500 birds without a single fence, you know, people shut me down and told me I'd be out of business in weeks. But you can do it. It's, you know, find your own space and your own people who will support you. Knowing your cost of production, that comes down to those business skills. Really get sharp on them. If you don't have them, recognise the gap and build them there. Communicate, the basis of all of our relationships. Businesses don't function if people aren't communicating well and if people aren't healthy and happy. Do the basics well, feed, water, move, and stay mobile. You know, don't burden yourself with infrastructure that you can't move easily, because you will end up degrading your soil health. And have fun, you know, really taking time to enjoy the system. It's such a beautiful system with your birds. I love nothing more than end of the day grabbing a few beers and heading out and, you know, sitting amongst those hens and those dogs in lovely ground cover and diverse plants. And it just gives me big happy moments to be out there among our hens. Thanks very much, Tib, and we'll take some questions later on.
Yeah, thanks, Blythe. That was so good. I love the way you ended that. It's good. You can tell that you really love plant diversity. We were having some slight tech issues this morning trying to get Sam's slides to work. So while we wait to see if that comes through my email, we might actually do some questions, Blythe. So got one from Jason asking what extra precautions / tasks do you need to do during times like today with 40+ degree days?
Great question. So we are very fortunate to have good access to high volume, high pressure water. That's one of our secret weapons down here around Harvey. It also affects our land values significantly. But the preparation really starts long before. So, you know, the preparation is having good van design. It's making sure, you know, your summer rotation is based around either shade or somewhere you can get water to. It's making sure your birds aren't carrying a parasite burden. So we do worm our birds every 3 months. The bird worm cycle is linked in with flies. And so particularly over that summer period, it is hard to get out of it. I'm sure people who are better poultry farmers than me have, but at this stage, I'm not willing to sacrifice the bird health and welfare. If they're carrying a parasite burden, they are going to feel extremes so much more. And then there's a good, not to direct post, I did a post last week or a reel on our Instagram about the things we do to prep for heat waves and some of the more specifics, but we run sprinklers, particularly off the end of our troughs to make sure that the water's going into the troughs are staying cool. So you've got constant circulation. We move those sprinklers a lot during the day so the birds actually get into that cool ground, and dust bathing in that cool ground is where they'll get a lot of the benefit. A lot of birds won't simply go under a sprinkler. Moving those sprinklers so that you're catching as the shade comes over. So in the morning, you know, I would have the sprinklers going where the afternoon shade will be. So in the afternoon when it's hottest, they've got shade and moist ground. Creating water curtains sort of coming down off the van simply with your positioning of sprinklers so that you get evaporative cooling, and taking away anything which is going to disturb the birds. So, you know, and 40 degrees isn't there for us. If we got above 42 degrees, I'd probably remove all of the guardians so that they weren't taking up bird shade. I'd be making sure, you know, no vehicles or activity or anything down there which is going to scare the birds or sort of make them move more than they had to. You know, you'd be checking your water more regularly. If you've got automated doors and things, I would be checking them, you know, once you're over 37 degrees, anything that could go wrong in your system, I'd be checking really regularly and fixing it so that it's not able to go wrong. You know, we're very fortunate here that we don't get the cumulative heat. We tend to cool down overnight. If you're in the wheat belt and things, I'd be putting sprinklers on the vans at night to cool down that infrastructure, because if you're working with a lot of steel, you know, that heats up and stays hot. So doing what you can there and really putting in the hard yards during that period for the benefit. There's been some awful stories of the heat waves, even recently, of, you know, some big losses, particularly recognising a lot of major heat stress events actually happen when birds crowd together under a cool place. So it's not the heat itself that cooks them. They all want to be in the cool place, and their own body heat then starts cooking them. So, you know, in really big heat events, I've put the cattle truck out in the paddock so they've got extra shade. You know, every available vehicle which can turn over can go out there if I'm caught in a spot where I didn't want to be, just so the birds can spread out and actually have their own room. So that's some ideas there.
Yeah, cool. Thanks, Blythe. One from Mick asking about if you have a sense of how much feed a non-pastured bird needs per day in comparison to the 120 grams per bird per day in a pastured system, in terms of, yeah, your financial savings.
Yep. I don't think there's that much difference in feed, to be honest. If you're putting, you know, maybe if you're putting a grain crop out there, or you've really got a heap of high protein pasture, but protein is going to be your limiting factor in sort of any egg or bird or chicken situation. So I don't actually think you save that much at all from a feed perspective, and making sure that feed is there ad lib is really important.
Yeah, cool. Alex has asked, as your pastures have improved in health, does that give you more time between rotations? Can the pastures handle longer grazing periods or more birds as biodiversity and grass/root health improves?
Yeah, great question. I guess we've got sort of old school irrigation paddocks, which are heavy kikuyu. So ironically, it's the kikuyu that can take more birds and more pressure and hold up because it recovers so well and has that really thick mat. Definitely the length of rotation, and that's more, I guess, in our cattle department. Obviously, as you grow more feed, they're in one place, or not so much in one place for longer, but their rotation will take longer to get out of a paddock. So that, just once it gets easier, everything starts getting easier. But from a bird chicken perspective, as far as carrying more, they can be so destructive so quickly. You can have holes, that's about a foot deep and just perfect cookie cutter round, particularly in our compacted ground, within 3 to 4 days of the birds being in the same place. So for that, we wouldn't really leave hens longer because they will choose a favourite spot to target and keep on targeting.
Yeah. Someone just asked what area you're in and what acreage do you rotate your chickens on?
Yeah, so we're down near Harvey, so hour and a half south of Perth, and we've got about 200 acres we rotate our birds over, and that's pretty good at not going over the same ground within 12 months.
Yeah. And in terms of your feed, like your quality of feed, I guess, and what currently, I guess, are you feeding? Where are you getting it from?
Yeah, so we feed a Kettridge's pellet. That's a pellet we've sort of developed ourselves with our nutritionist. So that is GM free because that is really what our customers want to see. We looked at going down the organic road. We run our pastures organically, but the reality of sourcing organic grain, the cost difference was so much, we felt it put it out of reach for a lot of the consumers we wanted to target. So the main thing, we run a high protein grain, sort of minimum 17%. We'd rather it up around 18, 19%, which is where it mostly tests at. We've added a prebiotic, probiotic in there. We did that after we had a small fowl pox outbreak. We had some feeding issues. I had someone feeding that wasn't my 4 buckets on some pullets, wasn't their 4 buckets on some pullets. Our birds were sort of not at their peak immunity wise, and then we had an outbreak of fowl pox, and that's something. Sorry, I'll just go. I forgot the last slide there, Tib. I'll just put that up if anyone wants to screen share it because there are some information there. So that the ag department were really great in that as far as doing bird testings and things. That was kind of a crisis situation. I think we lost about 40 birds pretty quickly with some mysterious symptoms. And that's when Portec, the chicken vet specialists in WA, and the ag department were just incredible at supporting us through that. We didn't know what was going on. And then after that, we obviously addressed the student feeding situation, that students don't get to feed pullets anymore. And also went down the line of adding some probiotic, prebiotic into our food. So once you're at a bit of a scale, you do have that option of working out your own ration to make sure you're getting the quality. And to be honest, it doesn't cost that much more. Once you're a producer who, is buying by the truckload, they're pretty happy to help you build what you want.
Yeah, that's good. So I just wanted to say Sam's presentation still hasn't come through. So yeah, just keep your questions coming through. And Sam, if you have any answers to the questions as well, feel free to chime in.
I think I've got it here, Tib.
Oh, have you got it?
Yeah, it's down as downloaded in my email.
Oh, brilliant. We might switch over to Sam and then we can come back to the remaining questions as well.
Yep. Can I just, while I've just got that screen share up there, if anyone wants to get it. So that's some info from DPIRD. If you're in the planning stage, that's an email address up the top there for emailing them as far as what your water table is, if there's any soil types or things in your area which may be limitations. There's a mapping tool there which can put all that onto maps for you to prepare applications and submissions. With the Victorian regulation, which is what I really recommend people sort of planning to make sure they can meet those standards, because that does translate well to our local government. If you just Google low density mobile outdoor poultry farm planning, you'll get that document. There's some biosecurity information with the Ag department and the food labelling and food safety side of things, which often, you know, that's a bit of the boring bit, but quite important in keeping everyone alive.
Sweet. While you get Sam's slides up, I'll just give some background and introduce Sam. So he works with his partner Steph, and they operate Rosa's Ridge down Rosa Glenway. So they're on a mission to promote regen ag and pasture-raised meats. So they don't just have chickens. I'm sure Sam will talk to you about that. And it was all fueled by their passion for ethical and nutritional food. So armed with minimal farm knowledge and faced with financial and legal hurdles, they made the move to southwest WA, just down near Margs, and established Rosa's Ridge in 2016. So they emerged as pioneers in WA's pastured poultry industry and marked their commitment to efficiency and innovation, and they're now the leading producers of pastured chicken in WA. They're determined to change the face of farming and food production in Australia by making pasture-raised meats accessible to as many people as possible. So welcome, Sam. Thanks for holding on there, and I'm glad we've got the slides working.
Yeah, thank you for having me. And not much time left, so let's get to it. So as to be said, my wife Steph and I have 2 kids, and we operate Rosa's Ridge. And we are a first generation farmer, and we use regenerative practices to produce pasture-raised chicken. We live and farm on 123 acres in Rosa Brook, which is roughly 15 k's east of Margaret River. Our mission here at Rosa's Ridge is to get pasture-raised chicken into as many homes as possible without reducing the quality of our meat or compromising animal welfare or our environment. Before I get into the pasture chicken side of things, I'll tell you a bit into my background of how I got into farming. So I'm a first generation farmer. I grew up in Perth on a 2.5 acre bush block. Even though we had this big amount of property, we didn't actually do any farming or any layers or even a veggie patch. At 16, I started to work in the family's hydraulic business and became a fitter and turner by trade. And eventually it was in this industry for 8.5 years. I learned quickly that I didn't like or have a passion for hydraulics like my dad did, and decided not to continue on in his business. But at this stage, I was married with 2 kids and a mortgage, and a career time at this chain was going to be pretty hard. But I decided it had to happen. So I explored a lot of options into what I could be, from landscaping to career firefighting, and I eventually took the leap and sold the family home and tried my hand at dairy farming in Mount Gambier, South Australia. So in Mount Gambier, I just fell in love with farming and everything about it, being outside, working with the animals, and just the variety of work you could do. I did a lot of research over at Mount Gambier because I had lots of time to think while I was milking cows. I was then inspired by Joel Salatin's book, You Can Farm, and we left a year later with a mission to start our own direct-to-market farm. I did a short stint on an organic pasture-raised egg farm where I was able to build a scrap brooder, which is the picture on the right, and raise my first trial of 100 meat chickens. Once out of the brooder, we grew them in a Salatin-style coop and moved them every day for 9 weeks. So on the day of processing, we're left with 91 chickens to process in the backyard. And I remember waking up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was thunder and lightning, and I was just questioning everything about what I was doing and if I should be doing this at all. But we cracked on, and it took 14 hours to process those chickens. After that, I got all my numbers together, and I was like, with scale, we should be able to make a business out of it. And with chickens especially, you need a good amount of scale to make a profitable business. And you know, for us, you need to be around, for meat chickens, for us, you need to be around 9,000, at least 9,000, 10,000 chickens a year. So once I did that, I started knocking on doors in the local area to see if I could lease any land, and but it didn't come to much success. My dad, who actually laughed at me when I wanted to become a farmer and move to South Australia, got wind of this and decided to invest in it. In 2019, we bought a blank canvas 123-acre farm in Rosa, and 3 months later, we moved on with a little donga. And this is where Rosa's Ridge was born. So one of our first hurdles was council approval. It can be pretty daunting, and it's pretty interesting, as you can put as much chicken manure as you want on your property as possible. But as soon as you get a couple of hundred live chickens on farm, you need approval down in Margaret River. So chicken farm is classified as intensive agriculture and requires approval from the Shire and also the Water Department, in some cases the EPA. We are also, what made it more difficult was that we're located in a P3 protected water zone. So this is where the Shire collects water for a backup town water supply. And that means that certain enterprises are restricted, and it will come with a lot of conditions. When we first applied and went to the Water Department, they told us that it'd be easy if we just use conventional sheds, and as it would be more environmentally friendly and easier to approve. So we decided to get a good environmental consultant on board. We used Emerger Consultants, and as trying to do this by ourselves, which is going nowhere. And we found that a lot of the government departments didn't really talk to people straight up, and they liked having a consultant in there as well. So we ended up writing a 76-page nutrient management plan, and we submitted it. And this process took about 12 months before we could even get onto the property. Yeah, next slide, please. Alrighty, let's get into broiler farming. So we use the standard meat chicken from Ingham's. This is the Ross 308 strain. We use this because it's very efficient in converting feed to meat. But the thing they do need is a diet to match. Nutrition is so important with these guys, and Joel Salatin calls these the NASCAR chickens because they need a high octane fuel to keep them going. It's also quite an art form and takes years of good breeding to create your own line of meat chicken. And our aim here at Rosa's Ridge is to change this industry by creating a market for pasture-raised chicken first, and then work backwards from there. So in the conventional sheds, these guys will take about 4 to 6 weeks of age to be ready to be harvested, whereas we take about 8 to 9 weeks old, and we look for a 2 kilo dress weight. Something that a lot of people don't know is that hormones were actually banned in the 1960s. We didn't know this when we first came in it. We were like, no hormones used, but it's actually banned, and someone pointed out to us, which we're very grateful for us. Next slide. So why do we raise them on pasture? So apart from being so delicious and just the amazing quality you can get from it, our stocking density is actually lower than the Australian certified organic free range. So we run 7 birds per square metre in our coops. Our chickens do not range outside of these coops for a variety of reasons. And the ACO is 12 birds per square metre. So these coops are moved daily, one whole length of the coop to fresh grass to get them off their manure. And the grass usually has about 12 months of recovery and time to metabolize their manure before chickens will be on that bit of land again. The reputable farms like Pasture-Bird and Polyface in America, along with the American Pasture Poultry Association, have done testing showing that the pasture-raised chicken has high levels of vitamin D, E, and A than conventionally raised chickens. So our birds can display all their natural behaviours and express themselves, and they can sunbake, dust bathe, scratch around, forage, and do all those sorts of things. Raising them outside also, with the sunshine and fresh air and daily moves, negates the need to medicate or use antibiotics. So in our feed, we use no medication or antibiotics whatsoever. Raising them on pasture provides a naturally clean fertilizer for our soils and helps to regenerate them. Next slide. So your brooder is one of the most important things, and we thought we could get away with using a old dairy shed, and which turned out to bite us in the butt. So it was great during summer and spring when it was warm, but when the rain came, we had some serious issues. So in this shed, it was when they built, when they used concrete with coffee rock, and so it had no water barrier underneath, so all the moisture in the ground was getting drawn up through the concrete into our sawdust, and was creating a wet, soggy mess. And we were using heaps and heaps of sawdust to keep our chicks dry. The rain also brought heaps of rats in, and we had rats living in and under the shed, as there were so many holes to hide in, and it was impossible to keep them out. We tried to go the really natural way and use live traps and rat traps, but it just didn't work, and we decided eventually to use Racumin, our friendly bait. And it solved all our issues with rats, and we haven't had any problems since. The only thing to do is just to keep on top of it. Also in this brooder, the shed was an issue. One of the roof was an issue, sorry. One of the brooder roofs actually blew off in a storm, but fortunately no chicks were inside. The concrete was completely uneven, so digging it out was really hard and painful, taking hours. So we gave up on that and built a purpose-built brooder with natural lighting, plenty of ventilation right outdoors, so we could actually get the tractor in and dig it out after every batch. And it's been one of the best things we've done. Next slide, please. So this is our new brooder shed. This is actually an older picture when we first built it about a year and a half ago. We currently have now insulated walls on it, and we're about to put a false insulated ceiling in to bring heating costs down and to make it a bit more even heat distribution around the brooder. So your brooder is your artificial hen, and until they are mostly feathered and weather hardened. So your brooder design and management will make or break your chicks. If it's not right, you'll have problems later on. It takes a few weeks for it to happen, but you might get leg issues later on, depending on cold breezes or wild temperature swings. It just really is important. So these chicks come into the brooder as day old from the hatchery, and we started around 32 degrees when the chicks arrive and reduced the temperature slowly through the week. And by 21 days, they need to be hardened to the temperatures outside. We try to do this as soon as possible so the chickens can spend more time on pasture. So obviously it needs to be warm and airtight, but the key thing is to have easily ventilation to keep putting fresh air into the room. Also needs a carbon diaper. We have used a number of things. We started off with pine shavings, but the cost doubled on us. So we tried some aspen shavings, which was quite expensive as well. And we tried straw, but both those things didn't compost very well and didn't absorb as well until we found a good supplier of sawdust. And the sawdust absorbs the manure and nutrients or whatever it is going in from the chicken much better, and is also pretty cheap to obtain. So when we first started, we had electric heat lamps. These were a constant, we were forever changing the heat lamp height depending on what was going on outside temperature-wise. And during the night, we'd always worry if the power was going to go off and would have freezing chicks. So we now use a commercial shed gas heater, which is on a thermostat that runs off the pilot light, meaning that no electricity is needed. These burn really well, and you can do a lot of chicks in the brooder. So at the moment we are running 900 chicks per brooder. So we have 2 brooders, and we're getting in 900 chicks per fortnight. So yeah, the thing to remember is that chicks are highly temperature sensitive in the first week, and any drafts or big changes in temperature will severely impact the growth and survival of your chicks. So for water, we use just the standard bell drinkers and nipple drinkers. Yeah, next slide, please. At approximately 8 to 9 weeks of age, the birds have reached their harvestable weight. Ooh, I've done my read. No, it's wrong.
Sorry,
so anyway, we got.
I just want to jump in and say, if people need to go at 11, we'll send the recording out in a follow-up email, so don't panic. But we'll just keep going and answer questions and finish your presentation. So just wanted to let people know if they need to head off. Sorry, continue.
That's all right. So when we first did our trial batch, we started with the Salvation coops. These are very inefficient and just very cumbersome and labor intensive. I think some people are using now, and it takes about 40 minutes to move about 600 chickens. You put about 75 chickens in there. The other thing, it wasn't plumbed up to water. So what we did while we're waiting for approval, we were researching different coop designs around the world, and we came across a Cobb Creek Polytex range coop, which is 11 meters by 6 meters. We looked at importing this as we built a first design on farm, but it was quite expensive, and it took a couple of months to build in between obviously working. And but we looked at importing this coop, but it just ended up being way too expensive. So we decided to design our own coop. So if you go to the next slide. So now we have the Rosa's Ridge Chicken Chalet. So this is all designed and built on farm. We rolled all the steel ourselves and welded everything on farm. So this is a 13 meter long by 6.5 meter wide. Down the 13 meter long side is a RHS skid. So, and this is where the frame mounts to for the arches. And down the 6.5 meter side is a conveyor belt to stop the chickens getting out and also the foxes getting in. So I can move about 3,000 chickens in about 60 to 75 minutes every day, and it's just absolutely great. Water's plumbed up with a we have about 3 kilometers worth of pipe in our paddocks, and so we can do quick connect coupling into our system, and it runs a 100-meter line behind it. It gets pulled behind. It also has roll-up sides on each side, and a top and end ventilation windows, and a sprinkler system for days like today. The sprinklers are inside. The pasture management needs, you need to mow or graze your pasture before your chickens come onto it. So you can see the top right picture. It's nice and low, and you can see where the chickens have been. So this will actually encourage the grazing of the chickens. Obviously, they don't eat a lot of grass. It's mainly maybe 10%, 12%. It's not much, but it does a huge amount for their nutrition. And during the springtime, we'll let the grass grow up if you see the left picture there at the top, we'll let the grass grow up really high where the chickens aren't moving, and eventually that will nicely fold down to a mat of mulch so that we can maintain our ground cover. So we are required in our nutrient management plan to have at least 50% ground cover, whereas actually we lose 10% to the chicken scratching and doing what they do. We can go to the next one. At approximately 8 to 9 weeks of age, the birds are ready to be harvested. So I crate the chickens at night, and when the birds are settled down, and this is to reduce the stress on the handling. Just makes it a lot easier when they're pretty much sleeping. We put about 7 chickens per crate, and we crate about 400 chickens in an hour. And then the next morning, we leave the crates in there overnight. The next morning, we load the crates onto the trailer so we can be transporting the cool of the day. All our birds are hand processed by Southampton Food Hub, which is only just 1-2 micro advertised in WA. This is all used without any chlorine baths, and it's just such a great job they do. Our chicken is then broken down by a butcher, cryovac and frozen. So we had to go out and get a refrigeration van so we can transfer from the abattoir to butcher and then back to home. So we built a big walk-in freezer, and then freezing the chicken right away enables us to deliver the highest quality of product, as there's still much work to be done to make it available for fresh. We're currently processing about 350, soon to be 400 chickens a week, and we hope to increase this as more people jump onto pastured chicken. Next slide, please. So overall, it's been quite a steep learning curve, and lots of been pushed to my absolute limit all the time with this. But it's been one great journey, and it's great to still be able to do it. But there's still lots of work to do in pastured poultry to make it actually an impactful industry in Australia, as pastured chicken growers contribute only around 0.002% per day of what the actual commercial chicken industry does. So we have a longer way to go, but we're pretty keen to make it happen, and just keep pushing as we go. There's lots of people that we've met along the way, and such as the abattoir and butcher, who enable us to do this important work. If you'd like to support us, you can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and you can follow along and see behind the scenes. We also have several ways you can get your hands on our produce, as you see on the screen. And we're excited to actually finally launch our website with an online shop. So stay tuned for that. And thank you for joining me. And it's my hope we'll be able to change the chicken industry for the better. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Sam. That's exciting. Your website's up and running now?
Oh, not yet. It's soon. I keep saying soon, but yeah, we're getting there. It seems to take a long time.
No, that's good. So wondering if one of you wanted to mention a new pasture-raised chicken and egg campaign that's coming out.
Yeah, sure. So at the moment, I think Alex is actually online, is he? Yep. So Simple Ben it's a sort of videography business which has been doing a lot of support work in the regenerative space. Has actually come up with a concept and launching at the moment. We're in the organisational stages of a media campaign to promote pasture-raised, both meat and eggs, to try and get more consumer understanding and support to I guess influence purchasing decisions. So that's really innovative, and kind of that's going to be producer and sort of supporter funded. So there's a fair few of us sort of going in and putting money towards that to try and create those marketing opportunities for pastured birds. So I'm not sure. I'll check in with Alex on that, Tibby, whether there's anything that can be distributed at this point, whether anyone sort of wanted to come on board with that and be part of it. There's sort of a number of different levels of support, but really important to be starting to tell our story.
Yeah, definitely. Thanks, Blythe. So a couple of questions. One from Wild Maple Farm. So they're first-time farmers with no capital on a smaller land size, and they're wondering what the best way to help gain financial backing to start up a business would be. I'm not sure if it's egg or meat that they're thinking, maybe both.
I guess for me and us, we started small and built up. I spent a lot of time working in other industries, which were, both mining and doing consulting and contracting in the welfare space with livestock. And so we came into it with a bit of capital. We only started with 100 acres because that's what we could buy on a home loan, and sort out lease blocks before building up to take on the property where we are now. There's lots of creative ways to gain backing, but the more creative, the more risk, I guess. And I've seen limited success with that true sort of crowdfunding kind of consumer supported model, because you start losing control and autonomy a bit. So, having a business case which fits into a more conventional finance structure, we've found the best way to move forward and maintain control. There is some things out there like Cultivate Farms, which matches young farmers with retiring farmers to try and give opportunities for people to get in at a bigger scale. But yeah, it is tough, and it starts small. Look for the highly profitable side of things, which may be smaller animals. It may be, mushrooms in a sea container. There's lots of things that can be done on a smaller scale land-wise, because with the price of land, it really is prohibitive to building larger enterprises from scratch.
And what about for yourself, Sam?
Well, I was quite fortunate. I had an investor, my dad. But if I didn't have him, like I said, I was pretty determined to make it happen. If I had to work, in a job and then farm on the side, I would have done that. That's probably what I'd recommend to do. If you've got a bit of land you can go on, you could also get a loan to get some equipment to get you going. Make sure it's a low risk loan, or at least just save up and do it. But yeah, you can be creative as you want. Also, it takes a balancing act to actually do all that sort of thing, though, and to keep it going. But yeah, I'd say just have a vision in place, and you might just have to backtrack a few times before you get to where you actually want to go, because it's a hard slog, and especially with a loan, I'd say those sorts of things can be very stressful, especially when you're dealing with animals that die. So you want to be wary of that as well if you're getting a loan. So yeah, all the best though. I hope it works.
Thanks. And someone's asked about both your locations, like if you're a bit more isolated, would you find it harder, or sort of how you came about to being where you are, and if you've got challenges, because I know, Sam, you mentioned the waterway and that being an issue as well.
So my location, we're in Rosebrook. If I was more isolated, we set out to be in this area for the reason of being in Margaret River area. We can kind of jump onto the Margaret River's what's it called? Reputation to have really good food. So we chose to be in this area. If you're more isolated, that would the challenges is just getting to your customer, and also to your processing and your and everything like feed mills. It's really hard. As soon as you start having to travel lots for feed mill, your price just jumps considerable. So if you're doing chickens, try keep it close to a major town that has a good population as well. Also helps with workers. So
yeah, I'm a little bit different. We kind of ended up here per chance through sort of partnering with a retiring farmer on the property we took over. If I was to start out again with pastured eggs as the aim, I would actually head out to a larger property. I'd be looking for a parkland type setup. Once you're in a more, I guess, true farming area, the acceptance of farming systems are higher. In somewhere with a higher population density, you've got the more different types of businesses and people a shire is servicing, and the harder it is for them to make decisions which they consider risky. So, you know, although there's some wonderful advantages of where we are, this business would be easier on a bigger, more open type of farm where you could keep your rotation going easily, and have less close neighbours. And I guess it just depends on your scale as far as access to market. You really do want to be accessing a high population for your market. Even, you know, we started when we were smaller going to Bunbury, and the time to go in and hit a farmer's market in Bunbury versus, you know, the amount you sold was not going to pay us. Heading in for Western Australia, really heading into Perth is where we had the number of people who appreciated what we did. You know, and the other advantage of going out wider is the lower land cost. You know, we're probably around some of the most highest value land, farmland wise in WA. And that puts so much pressure on our system because of what we have to serve with our production. So, you know, it's, you know, the beautiful thing about both sides of chickens is it improves the land and the pasture so much that you can actually pick up some quite degraded land base. You know, your feed inputs are coming in, and so you can really start improving that land with the chickens.
Yeah, brilliant. Cool. All right, well, that's pretty much all the questions. So thank you. And I know we've gone over time a bit, but just hold on for the last little bit. So I also wanted to acknowledge that you guys are both the presenters, Sam and Blythe, are based in the other NRM patches. So there's the Peel Harvey Catchment Council, and we collaborate with them lots to hold events and support each other's projects in the sustainable ag space. So yeah, we try and do the cross-regional ag work and just it's all about supporting the community. So I just wanted to shout out and say, if anyone's in the Peel Harvey region, go onto their website. They've got a newsletter, and check out their projects. There might be opportunities for landowners. And they're working on a new program to support the NRM through the National Landcare program. So yeah, looking forward to hearing more about that in the future. And then I've also got a quick presentation slide to summarise the Southwest NRM. So I'll just share my screen. That works. Everyone see my screen? Yep, brilliant, cool. So, I wonder if I can do. Didn't actually practice this when we were practicing each other's presentations, but I'll just click through. So, Southwest have a few ag projects. They've got a benchmarking soil carbon one, a grazing matcher, a pasture challenge, which is coming up next Wednesday, and a pollination one, a future drought hub, and surviving the dry. So the future drought hub, we work with Southwest as well, and it's all about supporting the community and landowners. So have a look at that link if you're interested. And then the surviving the dry, it's all about, yeah, strengthening those networks and communities for the social impacts during drought. You know, we've had a really hot summer, so yeah, reach out if you need support, because we're always up for supporting you guys. It's also another event coming up soon, the Community Resilience Network. And this is the Pasture Challenge one. I think, yeah, this one's free and it's on Valentine's Day. So if you feel like getting out and about in the pasture, head along to that. But I will include these in the follow-up email as well, so everyone can look them up. And then otherwise, that's pretty much it from us, unless anyone has any last-minute burning questions. I don't think that's it. So, yeah, based off that, a few links I'll send for newsletters, projects, and yeah, just wanted to finish off by thanking Sam and Blythe for your time. And And it's brilliant to learn about, the pastured poultry and eggs. And I hope everyone has learned something today and we can support farmers like you guys and newcomers, because I think it's a really cool space to support. So thanks for your time, and I'll send the recording out in due course.
Thanks, Tib.
All good.
Thanks, Debbie.
Thanks, everyone, for making the time. Hope it's helpful.
Have a good rest of your day, guys.